Hello there. In this video I'm going to show you how you can create a 3D printable vase to be printed in either metal or ceramic or sandstone using Fluid Designer for 3D printing. Now, I'm not actually going to reproduce the one that's on the screen, but I'm going to do something similar to this one in fact. So we're going to put a couple of holes in it and we're going to put some pattern on the outside. Now if you download Fluid Designer for 3D printing and go to Pots and Vases, you can open this particular object directly from Pots and Vases, but I'm going to show you how you can do it kind of from scratch if you like. And so if you go to the 3D templates cross sections folder, there's a number of objects in there that you can use. I'm going to use the circular cross section, but I'm going to very quickly show you the square cross section, because you could make a square shaped vase, a square cross section vase using that object, and there are also other shapes, pentagon, hexagon, etc. But I'm going to use the circular cross section, so I'm just going to drag and drop that object onto the workspace. And essentially we've got two things here. We've got this blue line on the side, this profile curve. And if I just hide the main body, the main shell, this profile curve, if you imagine it wrapped around a circle, what it does is create the solid shape. And that's done using Bezier curves. So if I highlight the circle cross section, that's the main body of the shape, you can see that there's a solidify modifier applied to the default object, which gives you this thickness of 3 millimeters in this case. I'm actually going to remove that in this instance and go back to the raw shell. So if I view from the front now, and I'll just switch on screencast keys, so any key presses I make should be displayed down here. There's the raw shell, and there's the profile curve on the left hand side, which generates the shape of the shell. Now if I press the tab key on the keyboard to go into edit mode, you can see that I can change the outline shape of this, and you can play around with this until you get to the sort of shape that you want. And if I zoom in, you'll notice I switch into millimeter mode there. And if I zoom in again, you can see it changes from centimeters to millimeters, so I can zoom in and adjust that there. And if I want to add a little bit more height to this, if I press the E key on the keyboard and then move the mouse up, I can actually extrude that and get an extra control point. These are control points on the side here. And notice at the bottom that there isn't anything at the bottom there at all, and so if I view it from the front, and if I highlight the control point at the bottom, and if I press E again on the keyboard to extrude, and if I move my mouse to the right, you can see I get a new control point there, and I've now got a bottom to my vase. Okay, so and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to view and front, and if I just scroll in here, what I'm going to try and do is straighten that out. It doesn't have to be straight on the bottom, but the shape of this can affect the finished object. Sometimes it does work with the control point higher up, but you may have to play around a little bit more. So I'm going to do it like that. Now if I'm happy with that shape, I can come out of edit mode by pressing the tab key on the keyboard. And what's important to understand at this point is that this is a curve, this object, not a mesh, a curve. And so if we're happy with the shape now, the next thing that we need to do is to convert it to a mesh. So with the main body highlighted, if I go to Tools, Object Tools and convert it to a mesh, and then if I actually click on the profile curve on the left again and press the tab key on the keyboard, you'll notice that it has no effect on the shape now. This main body is not a curve anymore, it's a mesh. So we can actually delete the profile curve on the left by hitting X key on the keyboard and deleting it. Now I want to create some holes in the bottom of this, So if I press the tab key on the keyboard to go into edit mode, you'll see the mesh, and at the moment we're in vertex select mode here. So if I just press the A key on the keyboard, that will deselect that vertices, and if I click the right mouse button and change my selection method from vertex to face select, you'll see that when I click on anything here, I select a whole face now, and A to deselect. Now I want to create some square holes here, so I'm going to press the B key on the keyboard, and I get this cursor appears, and I'm going to select a block of faces, and I need to make them symmetrical. I've got too many faces there, so if I hold down the shift key and just click on that one to deselect it, here's the y-axis, this blue line here. So I want faces evenly selected on either side of that, and if I press the X key on the keyboard now, I can delete those faces. Now notice there are faces at the back. That's on the back face of the object. So if I press B for border select again, and if I select those faces now and press the X key on the keyboard and delete those faces, what I've done is I've created an equal hole at the back. So if I just go to view and front again, and if I just scroll it down, and I'm just going to do the same above somewhere. So it's B on the keyboard, hold down the mouse button, select a block of faces, and X on the keyboard to delete the faces. I need to just zoom in here, make sure I do select the right faces at the back. So B on the keyboard, highlight those faces again, X, and delete. So I've got even holes at the front and the back of the object now. So we can now come out of edit mode. Now this is just a shell at the moment, so we want to apply some thickness to this so that it's a solid object that will 3D print, and we can do that in the properties panel here by going to add modifier and a solidify modifier. And you'll see there's a slight shadow at the top there, but no great thickness at the moment. So I'm going to increase this thickness to 1, 2 and 3 millimeters there. Now if you're printing in ceramics, you need at least a thickness of 3 millimeters. If you're printing in metal or plastic, you can get away with 1 millimeter. And you can see that that thickness has been applied all around now. Now what I would also do here is I would tick high quality and even thickness. And then we've got this offset value here. Now if I go to view and front view, and if I just scroll in and zoom in on the bottom of the object, if I switch to wireframe mode, you can see the inside profile of our vase. So there's the 3 millimeter thickness. Now sometimes this offset value is best changed to either +1 or 0. It does depend upon the profile shape that you've got, what you might want to do there, but you do want to have a look in and make sure everything looks quite smooth. Sometimes when you create objects like this, you'll get some weird geometry on the inside and faces crossing into themselves. You don't want that. So offset 0 or +1 is usually the best kind of setting, rather than the -1. So if I just come out of wireframe mode there, go back to material mode again. Now I'm going to apply this modifier. I'm going to say that I'm happy with 3 millimeters thickness. So I can just go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh, and that modifier disappears now. And I'm stuck with my 3 millimeters thickness now. So make sure you're happy with that before you apply it. Now this, the way this has been created with the Bezier curve, there's not actually a huge number of faces here. In fact, if we look at the top here, we've got about 14,000 faces. So I would go into edit mode and press the A key on the keyboard. And if we press W on the keyboard for specials menu, and if we subdivide those faces, we go up to 55,000 faces. And if I hit W again and subdivide again, we're up to about 100 or 200,000 faces now, 220,000, and that's probably enough to go to. If I go to W now, and if I just smooth those faces off, and we'll see this better when we actually return from edit mode to normal mode. If I go W and smooth again, whoops, where's smooth? And I would tend to do this 4 or 5 times just to tidy up the edges of the object. Now you say you can't quite see it because there are so many faces there, but it does just smooth off the edges here. So I would do that 3 or 4 times, or maybe even 5 times. And yeah, that's okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how you can actually add patterns to the outside of this object. And depending upon the patterns that are on your system, I'm going to actually add a Korean pattern. So if I just scroll down here, Korean patterns, because this is a Korean style vase. So I'm going to add this pattern here to our vase. So it's Korean pattern 003B I need, and it's in patterns Korean. And the way to add that is to go to File and Append, and just go up through the menu system until you get to the Groups folder. And I need to look for patterns Korean, and I want Korean pattern 003B. And we always append the object. So if I append Korean pattern 003B, it will bring that into my workspace. And you can't see it at the moment because it's hidden behind our object. There it is. So I've just switched the view off for our object so we can see the pattern. Now if you want to change the thickness of this pattern, you can do, because this is actually a curve at the moment and it's got a thickness of 1mm by 2mm. So we could change the thickness of that, but we need to add some cross sections to our workspace, and you can do that by just going to File and Append. Just go up through the menu system, just go to 3D Templates Masters, and if I'm going to use rectangular cross sections, if I just go to Object, if I just highlight all of those objects except the default object, so what I'll do is I'll bring all these cross sections into my workspace now, so you can see they've all been appended. And if I select my Korean pattern now, at the moment the cross section is 1 by 2. I could thin it out, I could make it 1 by 4, 1 by 5. I can change the thickness basically, because this is a parametric smart object, it's a curve. And I'm going to actually set it at 1mm by 3mm, so it's 1mm there and 3mm deep. Now what I need to do is position this on the outside of my vase now, so just by clicking on the eye there I can switch the vase back into view. So if I just go to View and Front View, there's my object highlighted, so I'm just going to pull it up. And if I just go to View and Top View, I'll pull it out there so we can see it now on the outside of the object, on the outside of the vase. And if I just go to View and I think if I go to Left View, now what we want to do is to rotate this so we can fit it on the side of the vase there. So if I just go to Main Information icon, it's the we've got the Y-axis and the Z-axis there. So if I rotate this object about the X-axis, you can see that I can line it up with the side of the vase there. Okay. Now, once we're reasonably happy with the position of it, yeah, that's actually looking quite good now, because I've made it 3mm thick. That's fitting quite nicely on the side of my vase. So if I just go to View and Left again. Now what is important here is that this object does in fact fit through the outside of the vase. You don't want it protruding through the inside. So if we just try and look on the inside there, we can see it's not coming through on the inside. Probably better if I look from the bottom. Yeah, I can't see any grey from the bottom there. But what you do want, if I just go to view and left again, you do need to make sure that this object is just fitting into the face of the vase. Otherwise you'll have problems when you go to Netfab Basic. So if I just move this up, and if I just use the ruler now, we should be able to measure this as, there it is, it's about 3 millimeters, it is 3 millimeters thick. So if I just zoom in there, so what we want to do is we want to be able to watch as this touches the side of the object. Now if I switch off the snap here, I'll have much better control, and so I'm looking for it there. It's just at that point there where it's crossing inside of the object, and I need to make sure that it does that all the way along this edge. And once you've got that position, if you just double check what depth you've got here now, so we've got about 1.7 millimeters thickness there, so that's okay. So it is important to do that. Now if you did actually want to change the size of this, you could make it smaller. So if I press the S key on the keyboard, I could scale this down a little bit to say 0.8 or approximately 0.8. But remember, whenever you scale curves in Fluid Designer, you must do Control A and apply the scale to set the thickness back again. Now if I view that from the left hand side again, if I just move this object up, you can see that by changing it to a smaller thickness, the point at which the whole object just fits through the surface of the vase changes. So you may wish to do that. So if I just measure the thickness now, you can see that that's more than 2 millimeters thick now. Okay, so if I just go to view and front view, so there's my Korean pattern placed on the front. Now we are now in a position that we could join these together, or I need to change it to a mesh first before I join them together, and then create a 3D printable object. So if I go to Tools, Object Tools, and convert that to a mesh, and if I just go to View and Top View, so you can see that's where that particular pattern is placed. Now if you wanted to place more than one pattern on this object, what you'd need to do is to perhaps move this one to a different position on the object. So if I wanted 4 around the vase, perhaps I'd want to move this one to 90 degrees around here before I place the next Korean pattern, which would be located in this same location. Now if I click on here, you can see that my object is rotating about the Z axis here, but it's not rotating about the vase. So if I just set that back to 0, and the reason for that is that it's rotating it about this point here, the centre of gravity of this object. Well, if I change the centre of gravity of it, if I change the origin to the cursor is this point here at the centre of the screen. As I move Z now, you notice I'm rotating it not about itself, but about the centre point here. So if you want 4 objects around here, the best thing to do is to rotate that object 90 degrees before you place the next Korean pattern on the front of the vase, and then similarly move that one around as well if you want to add a 3rd and a 4th. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to work with one pattern here, and now we've got it all in position. What we want to do is if I hold down the shift key on the keyboard and go to highlight the vase as well as the Korean pattern. Haven't quite highlighted the vase. Okay, so I've got the Korean pattern and the vase both highlighted. If I go to Tools, Object Tools, and join them now so that they become one object, all I need to do now is to run that through Netfab Basic to repair any slight imperfections in the surface of this, and then you've got a 3D printable vase. So you do that by going to File and Export it, and I tend to use Wavefront Object, and I'm going to export it to the desktop, and I'm going to call it Korean Vase. So I'm going to export that object to the desktop and then import that into Netfab Basic. Okay, so that's been saved to the desktop now. So you must always go to Netfab Basic when using Fluid Designer for 3D printing. So go to Project and Open. Go to the desktop, open the Korean Vase. Now it's about 40 megabytes this, so it does take a few seconds to load it. But because we've used a parametric smart object as the Korean pattern there, I'm pretty confident that Netfab is going to fix it. So there is a warning red triangle there, and the issues are just surface issues on this object here. So all you need to do in Netfab is to run the repair procedure. Click update there. So there's some holes and some border edges, so just run repair. And once Netfab's done that, getting there, if we just click update, you can see all of these have been set back to 0, so you just apply the repair and remove the old part, and our warning red triangle has disappeared now. So there's our Korean style vase, and all we need to do now is go to Part and export it as a wavefront object again, and I tend to write on top of the original one and just save that and just say yes. So there's your vase created with a pattern, and obviously you can put any pattern you like from our system onto the outside of the vase. Okay, so thank you for listening. Good luck.